Geez Louise, looks like NATO launched a massive aggression against Holy Russia. The situation seems hopeless, but fate intervenes. An engineer named Maria invents a time machine. The fearless Amazon travels back to 1947 with a mission to get pregnant with Stalin's child and bring forth a new Russian messiah, one who can save the motherland from NATO. Rising through the ranks of the NKVD, she soon earns an audience with Stalin himself. But just as the goal seems within reach, disaster strikes. Turns out Stalin is not into women. It appears all is lost. Russia is doomed. But then a Spetsnaz lieutenant discovers Maria's diary in the archives and sets off on a mission to correct her mistakes and obtain the precious seed of the leader. But can he fend off a group of time-traveling agents of US aid who are hot on his trail? And will the Soviet criminal code's anti-gay laws end up dooming Russia's future? The seed of the leader, available now at bookstores near you. So there is some weird stuff going on in Russia. You might have seen some of it online. Reactionary time travel novels, the oddly specific fixation on blaming the Englishman for society's woes, the assassination of the famous Russian politician Oleg Bilibin in broad daylight. Today, we'll get to the bottom of this by exploring the career and the life journal page of two authors, a duo of very horny Russophile writers and game developers from Kharkiv, Ukraine, who helped shape this culture. Yana Botsman and Dmitry Gordievsky, both born in 1973, are childhood friends who have written countless books and video game scripts together under the name Alexander Zorich. That's two people, one name. They were early innovators of Russian nationalist fiction and played a key role in developing New Union, a sophisticated Soviet-themed Fallout 3 clone. But that happens later in their career. It's one of those stories that start innocently but then get crazier and crazier. The Zorich's first foray into video game writing was an uncontroversial and innovative real-time strategy game, a genre that was in dire need of fresh ideas. Tuesday, July 6th, 2004. I have completed my work as a screenwriter and historical consultant for a World War II game with the ambitions of a cinematic blockbuster. The challenge was to craft an engaging story without offending Cleo, the muse of history. Bestway, the studio behind the project, was founded in 1991 in Severodonetsk, Ukraine, but at the time game development wasn't on their radar. Dmitry Morozov started as a programmer before moving into entrepreneurship. By 2001, he had gathered a small team of hobbyists with no prior experience in game development. Their first few years were spent simply learning the tools of the trade. In 2003, the team put together a tech demo and sent it to 1C, a major Russian software distributor. If you were a game developer from this part of the world in the 2000s, chances are you'll end up working with 1C. The game that grew out of Morozov's demo would eventually develop a very impressive list of features. A sophisticated ballistic system where every bullet has its own trajectory. Destructible environments. Nearly every building could be damaged or demolished in realistic ways. Instead of health bars, vehicles had detailed damage models, allowing specific components to be disabled. Armor values varied across different parts of a vehicle, making positioning and targeting crucial. Tanks typically have thick front but thinner rear armor, meaning weaker units could take down stronger units with smart tactics. A well-executed flanking maneuver could turn the tide of a battle, even after a major loss. In addition, there were individual inventories for both soldiers and vehicles, and a manual mode for direct unit control with WASD keys, extremely useful for targeting weak points in tank duels. Writing a video game is a lot of work as it turns out, but eventually the Zoriches were done. All written material was to be sent to the publisher for the voiceover. Satisfied with their work, Dmitry and Yana head to a restaurant to celebrate. Just as they place their order, the phone rings. The publisher has made some changes to the script and the company wants the Zoriches to review them, just in case. So they get home, open the files, and what the is this? They sure as hell didn't write any of this gibberish. What happened? Turns out the 1C company had a rather unique approach to translation. First, the text was sent to England, where it was run through what was likely a crude machine translation software. Remember, this was 2004. Then, the English version was edited down before being translated back into Russian, and this final, twice mangled mess of a script was sent to the publisher for voice acting. And that's probably how target in sight becomes aim is in the reach zone. How the 1C company managed to stay in business for this long is one of the great mysteries of the industry. The professional voice actors were scheduled to arrive at the studio in Moscow the next day at 10 a.m. Dmitry and Yana had to spend a sleepless night undoing the damage to the text. In the West, the game was released under the name Soldiers Heroes of World War II, or as Morozov put it, Soldiers Heroes of World War. The first full-fledged sequel, Faces of War, arrived in 2006. Then came Men of War in 2009, and in 2011, the German studio Digital Mindsoft developed Men of War Assault Squad. Whereas the original games focused on small-scale tactical battles, in the German game the armies were much bigger and more sophisticated in composition. It's hard to overstate just how important this change was. In the original Soldiers, the first Wehrmacht mission hands the player a Tiger tank, only for the crew to immediately dismount and fight the British commandos on foot. That's crazy. Let's never do this again. The German developers took the ideas and technology and refined them into what many would call the definitive Men of War experience. So, strictly speaking, Men of War isn't Slav jank. It's Teuton jank. Well, it's a bit of both. The games were selling, and 1C kept approving new titles, but they never understood what made them successful. Eventually, the company saturated the market with low-effort Men of War sequels, gradually reducing the series to a shovelware brand. Tuesday, July 29th, 2004. A fearsome beast has appeared in the immediate vicinity of my alma mater, the Onanist. As many may know, the southern facade of the university overlooks the Kharkiv Zoo. In fact, the distance between the lecture halls and the animal enclosures is mere 15 meters, symbolic in its own way, but that's not the point. Every morning, the onanist, gazing at the high windows of the Temple of Knowledge, begins his solitary, frenzied pursuit of his endeavor. His eyes burn with an otherworldly fire of unrequited emotion. The Russophone sci-fi writers, known as fantastics, favored this needlessly flowery style that would give any editor an aneurysm. To translate from Zorich speak, a monkey in the nearby zoo was masturbating in view of the students, disrupting the exam atmosphere at the university where they were teaching. And even bigger things were unfolding elsewhere in the country. The 2004 Ukrainian presidential election faced widespread allegations of corruption, igniting the mass protests known as the Orange Revolution. The disputed results were overturned, leading to a new election in which the pro-Western candidate emerged victorious. Russophiles like Yana saw President Yushchenko as an extinction-level event. How else can I, as a Russian, feel about the genocide of my culture? This was even worse than the masturbating monkey. Of course, one could simply lie down on the tracks and wait to be run over by the locomotive of history. But Dmitry and Yana had no intention of doing that. They had other plans. Monday, October 30th, 2006. The space sim Tomorrow War is out. Everyone play it. This is the opium of the masses, these games. I am a dealer of this opium, a drug dealer, and I am, perhaps, beyond redemption. What is Tomorrow War? It's a book series and a video game. It's the idea the Zoriches are most famous for. Many centuries in the future, Earth is governed by a collection of superstates called directories. Together, they form an interstellar government, the United Nations. But the UN isn't the only human power among the stars. The Great Concordia, a Zoroastrian theocracy, controls the universe equivalent of Arrakis, a planet rich in vital space fuel. potential. The UN and the Concordians have something of a Molotov-Ribbentrop thing going. Certainly such a relationship will not fit. The fictional setting is called the Sphere of Great Race. That's one word. In this universe, each culture settled into a role that, according to Zoriches, best suits its intrinsic character. The Arabs, for instance, embraced a life of leisure, unburdened by military service, space exploration, or other pursuits deemed unnatural to them. Directory Islam was invaded and forcefully demilitarized by a combined effort of European, African, and Russian states. The Americans also don't have a space fleet, but not because they were forbidden from having a military, but rather because they don't want to. It's not in their nature. The Zoriches' brand of soft anti-Americanism is interesting. As Russophiles, one of the pillars of their worldview is the respect for the Soviet sacrifices in the Great Patriotic War. It's one of their core ideas, and Americans have failed to understand and respect that sacrifice. The writers see this failing as a fundamental weakness of American character. This perspective carries over into their storytelling. There is a technologically advanced nation of space aliens who, quote, fight like Americans. They are powerful and well-equipped, yet overly sensitive to casualties. By contrast, Europeans and Russians are depicted as being, quote, driven by an innate historical calling towards ambition, sacrifice, and achievement. The Nietzschean ethnicities who have what it takes. In the game's opening act, a UN task force joins with its Zoroastrian allies of the Great Concordia to annihilate an expedition of an alien race called the Jeeps. However, beyond this one instance, the game largely fails to deliver on the racism implied by its lore. All the foreigners we meet in Tomorrow War are fun and endearing characters. I played the game half a year ago, and I still remember many of them fondly. The protagonist befriends a cheerful American mercenary pilot who ultimately joins a Russian squadron to fight the Zoroastrians. A Chinese cook only serves the spiritual food, that is, a book of political theory written by their captain. The Hegel of our time, says the protagonist. A sentimental Czech bartender refuses to abandon his post, even as the space station is doomed to destruction. There are helpful African and Muslim characters, and an Iranian woman who serves as a potential love interest. Which way, Eastern man? This is so weird. If this was an American game from the same era, it would be the exact opposite of this. It would have a wholesome theme of friendship running through the narrative, but then a foreign character they don't like would be depicted as a gross racial caricature. A notable feature of this universe is the Global South representation. In a departure from typical sci-fi tropes, it's the South American Directory that ends up developing this universe equivalent of the F-35, a cutting-edge fighter craft at the forefront of military technology that ends up humiliating the Zoroastrians and at least one alien species. The same technology is later stolen by a Finnish space corsair in a story arc that has us work for the Anglo-Saxon pirate Jeremiah Blood, only to betray him and side with a group of space poachers led by a sentient tiger. 2 years of my precious life went into this project, writing the script, inventing gadgets, and attending game developer conferences. Tomorrow War shares a superficial resemblance to games like Wing Commander and Freelancer, but the storytelling is a step above the products it's trying to emulate. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the gameplay. All starfighters are called Fluggers in this, seem to have identical flight models, except for the space truck you get to pilot in a few missions. The combat is near effortless, thanks to auto-aiming space lasers every Flugger is equipped with, and weak visual feedback leaves the action unsatisfying. It's a shame, because the game does have some standout features, like seamless atmospheric flight transitions without loading screens. Another striking aspect of this universe, and perhaps of Russian world fantasts more broadly, is the notable lack of interest in abstract ideas. We never learned how Russia became a superpower. We never learned what made American ideas fail. Ideas don't matter. What matters is believing in yourself and having a cool aesthetic. The thinkery of Tomorrowverse never gets more sophisticated than that. Curiously, both Yana Botsman and Dmitry Gordevsky hold PhDs in philosophy, hers on Buddhist philosophy and his on medieval heresies. Both of them also have master's degrees in mathematics. When asked how philosophy influences her creative work, Yana struggles to give a clear answer. Essentially, it doesn't. Tomorrow War the novel was the first Zorich book to be translated into a foreign language, Polish. Tomorrow War the space shooter is plagued by game-breaking bugs. The Russian version currently sold on Steam is impossible to play to completion due to a typo in one of the dialogue files. The game simply refuses to progress past a certain point. Seems like something like this would be easy to fix, but they never did. The English version has a characteristically inept 1C translation. This did not make a lot of money. Meanwhile, important things were happening on planet Earth. A higher power, perhaps a guardian angel, seemed to be trying to send the Zorich duo a message. Thursday, May 31st, 2007. I recently heard that at the Kharkiv Zoo, a bear supposedly ate a person. A poor soul snuck into the zoo at night and then climbed onto the roof of the bear's enclosure. For some reason, this story stayed on my mind. I was curious about the motive. What drove this man to do that? Suicide? A momentary obsession? Wednesday, August the 1st, 2007. Zorich visited the town of Berdansk on the Azov Sea. What I liked a lot, the monument to summer dacha owners who exterminate the Colorado beetle. In 2007, Colorado was just a word, but by 2014, it was a slang term for separatist because of the colors of the St. George ribbon, a Russian military symbol. Wednesday, February 26th, 2008. Last week I was in Moscow and also in the Kremlin, that is, the Kremlin Palace of Congresses. As part of the Sobor, the officials gathered a group of intellectuals to discuss modern cultural topics. The Zoriches spoke at 2 round tables. Their career was doing great. This was about when they were discovered by Ukrainian internet trolls who did not take kindly to their Russism. This guy's face is f***ed up, and the woman's last name, Botsman? Do you think he f***s her? Nothing about their relationship was made public, but they do have different last names. If both of you like the Empire so much, why don't you emigrate there? We live on our land, in our city. I see no reason to emigrate anywhere. Tuesday, March 11th, 2008. Zorich made an RPG. Well, made is a bit of a stretch. Almost made. The game is called Beltion. Western name is Beltion Beyond Ritual. Most people know the Zoriches for the Tomorrow War books, but another big idea of theirs is the high fantasy setting called the Arch of Balance. In the distant land of Sarmontazara, there is the Arch of Balance, a powerful militarized religious order. Its members are tasked with monitoring and suppressing any manifestations of witchcraft, or as Zorich himself puts it, medieval-style bloody KGB and epic magical battles. The Sarmontazara books are known to include elements of romance. Some reviewers even labeled them as erotic fantasy. In a forum post, Yana complained that in Russian literature there was a bias towards Puritanism and tediousness. We had fun working with an anti-Puritan theme. It's just fun, that's all. Tuesday, July 8th, 2008. I'll start with a shocking confession. Yesterday, I watched German porn. I sat in my chair with a glass of tea, pondering the role of sexuality in the consumption structure of the society of the spectacle. At that moment, I realized that, essentially, if you strip away the details, the anonymous German director of Banana Forest Tale and I are both selling the same product. That's a curious observation, Dmitry. But do you know who else sells intriguing products? This video sponsor, Adam and Eve, the adult products company that keeps your secrets. Follow the link in the pinned comment and use the code WARLOCK for 50% off one item and free shipping in the US and Canada. Adam and Eve, 24/7 customer service, 90-day no-hassle returns, discreet shipping, over 50 years in business. 20% of the profit goes to fight the spread of HIV around the world. That's Adam and Eve. Thursday, April 23rd, 2009. It's out! Yes! I was sure it was over, dear readers, that the game would never see the light of day because of insufficient funding, because everything is always a mess, because life is a struggle. Who are the enemies of the Arch? The undead and the unliving, mages and sorcerers, forces of darkness and twilight, all who stand in the way of Varan's prosperity and rise. How will you serve the Arch? We serve day and night, in sickness and health, selflessly and zealously, for the Arch has given us everything, and our debt to it can never be repaid. Beltion was made by a team from Kiev called Rostok Games. They used an engine of their own design. The game's concept went through several iterations before becoming a linear, story-driven third-person action RPG with a pre-made protagonist. Between assignments, we stay in Pinarin, the capital of Varan. Pinarin might look massive, but in reality it consists of just 3 outdoor locations, although they are impressively detailed. Clearly, this is where much of the budget went. And despite its modest size, the city features an underground tunnel system for fast travel. Our KGB agent protagonist has a house in the city, and we are provided with civilian clothing. The Eye of Truth is one of our spook powers, an ability that slows time and reveals hidden details in the world. Here we use it to scan the traders for illegal magical contraband. The game is overloaded with near-incomprehensible high-fantasy jargon, and I love it. At the Gnor's command, the Raksavan sets out to track down the renegade Saitag. The journey takes them from Pinarin to the coast of Varan, where they'll sail to Crimson Port in the Ter Empire. Our sidekick is dramatically slain, only to reappear in a later mission. He says he is moving into our apartment now. Okay. Interesting plot element in a game about necromancers. I wonder what these 2 tricksters have in store for us. This is fun. Oh my god, is this a good game? Almost, but not quite. The combat is tolerable when it's easy, but once you get past the early levels it becomes a slog, and there is just too much of it. In the second half, we see some old levels reused. I guess the developers were running out of money. Is this why the Zoriches were worried? Visually, this might remind you of a Piranha Bytes RPG, like Gothic, but this resemblance is, unfortunately, superficial. I wish we had a game with Piranha Bytes gameplay, but with Zorich characters. That would have been perfect. Alas, Beltion was quickly forgotten, and remains obscure even in the nation it was made. If we betray our oath, may eternal damnation fall upon us, and may our bodies be consigned to the vortex of silver purity. In fact, there is more than one reason why a computer game is not art, explains Yana. A game does not evoke anything truly elevated, what used to be called divine in the player's consciousness, and it seems that the appeal to the elevated, the transcendent, the superhuman is precisely what distinguishes art from non-art. Wednesday, May 20th, 2009. Dmitry and Yana wrote a Stalker book. They seem to be a little embarrassed. They used to write real books once. Stalker is a multi-author book series based on the video game universe of the same name. Unlike the games, the books expand the setting beyond Chernobyl, introducing multiple anomalous zones in various parts of the world. As of 2025, there are 335 Stalker books, and more are still being written. In an interview, Sergei Grigorovich noted that the series once held the world record for the largest fiction book series, but eventually it lost that title. It would seem that, among serious fantasts, the Stalker books had a reputation for being a little basic. At the conference I just returned from, I was asked at least 20 times, "How did you end up like this?" Every time I explained that Ast Publishing made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. I don't think this phrase needs much elaboration, and no, I won't disclose the amount. Someone in the comments asked if the Zoriches had played Stalker. Dmitry and Yana evaded the question. They seem knowledgeable about gaming from reading magazines, but don't actually play much themselves. In the next few years, the Zoriches would write 3 Stalker books and co-author 3 more. The key to unraveling the mystery of the hyperstorm raging in the Iron Fields is the unique artifact Ouroboros. Blind Taras, the oldest stalker of the wasteland, foretold that with the statue of a snake biting its own tail, Klevtsov would be able to capture the P-Wave stabilizer. For he who commands the hyperstorm rules the world. Friday, March 26th, 2010. I recently came across this review about myself. Zorich is a dick, and his books are shit. I spent a lot of time thinking about who could have written this review. Meanwhile, it turns out professional critics haven't been sitting idly in the bushes either. They are mocking my Half-Life in every way imaginable. Half-Life is the name of one of his Stalker novels. Critic Vladimirsky says Zorich should be ashamed of participating in Stalker. Dear Vasily, why should I be ashamed? Am I selling my body? I earn my living by doing what I know how to do, writing, and there is absolutely nothing shameful about that. He goes on to imply that the sales figures are good, so clearly some people care. By the way, another criterion that separates art from non-art is the ability to outlive its time, to remain relevant years later. How many computer games have outlived their time? Can Doom 1 or Duke Nukem be taken seriously today? Perhaps, but only nostalgically, or as amusing relics. Ooh, look how scary that pixel is. This is hardly the case with painting, for example. Tuesday, April 6th, 2010. Dmitry and Yana obtained Russian citizenship, though they did keep their Ukrainian passports, a detail that will soon prove significant. The Zoriches were living a high life in Moscow, attending an event at the Iranian ambassador's residence, a yacht club convention, and the birthday celebration of Dmitry Galkovsky, a major figure in the early Russian blogosphere. His big intellectual contribution is the crypto-colony idea, which is a spin on a broader genre of conspiracy thinking that portrays the British Crown as the shadowy force manipulating the world events. According to his theory, the Russian Federation and the USSR before it has been under British colonial control since 1917. The historical left-wing movements, including Marxism-Leninism, were geopolitical weapons engineered by England to sabotage its rivals. A knowledgeable scholar once informed me that this, like anti-Semitism but about the Englishman genre of conspiracy, is surprisingly popular in Central Asia, even beyond Russia. It appears that this theory might not have a single author, rather multiple creators have stepped in to meet a demand in the free marketplace of ideas. A key appeal of Galkovsky's take on the conspiracy is its entertainment value. He makes history feel like video game lore. There is a near-total absence of any real attempt at understanding anything, just an engaging, almost a video game-like narrative. Vampire the Masquerade in real life. According to one source, in 2013 the Zoriches moved to the town of Balaklava, near Sevastopol. This was a year before the war. The Russian invasion divided Ukraine's Russophone Fantast community. Roughly a third of them supported Russia, another third backed Ukraine, and the rest chose the path of neutrality. The literary situation is like in 1917, says Yana. In an interview with a separatist ideologue Alexander Chelenko, Dmitry shared the writer's political predictions. In their scenario, the Ukrainian war was supposed to be started by the neo-Ottoman Turkey. In 2021, Turkey seizes Crimea and joins a newly established Islamic Caliphate. The final battle for Ukraine's liberation is fought between the Caliphate and the Russo-German alliance. I must say, I didn't see this coming, but it turns out Tomorrow War's world building was shaped by what the authors saw as a realistic vision of the future. Zorich should get into Hearts of Iron modding. In March 2014, Russian lawmaker Oleg Mikheyev drafted a bill to ban computer games that promote hatred. Mikheyev was outraged by fascist Bandera games like Soldiers, Heroes of World War II. Bestway founder Dmitry Morozov was surprised to find himself labeled a fascist. When designing the missions, he deliberately avoided letting players control Nazi forces against the Soviets. That would have been tasteless. When the war reached Severodonetsk, the studio had to be evacuated, first to Europe, and then, when Europe got too expensive, back to Ukraine. Eventually, they settled in the town of Cherkasy, and the Zoriches were doing just fine. The armed conflict didn't put a dent in their writing career. Thursday, April 23rd, 2015. While I was roaming around western Crimea, admiring copper-red sunsets and green meadows grazed by stout livestock, my new novel, Marine Conqueror of Mages, was released by Exmo. Accidental travel is a plot device in which ordinary people unexpectedly find themselves in another place or time, like Philip J. Fry from Futurama. Russians love this genre and have a unique, often politicized take on it, sometimes referred to as Russian isekai. Most isekai writers were born between 1961 and 1973. They watched their careers collapse and their education become obsolete. The fall of the USSR stole their future, so it's only natural that many fantasize about going back in time to fix it. So how do they do it? Well, German Romanov, Comrade Führer. It's a 2-book series. A modern Russian Special Forces soldier is transported back in time into the body of Adolf Hitler. He does his best to delay the war with the USSR, and in the second book, Hitler launches Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. The reviews are not good. The fake Hitler is Mr. Romanov's Mary Sue. Viktor Dubček, Red Padawan. On June 21st, 1941, the day before the Nazis launch Operation Barbarossa, a star destroyer, the Executor, emerges from hyperspace over the Soviet Union. Aboard is none other than Darth Vader himself. Vader establishes contact with the Soviet leadership. An alliance is forged. Joseph Stalin and Darth Vader united against Nazi Germany. Imperial stormtroopers and Red Army soldiers fight heroically against the Wehrmacht. Though, according to reviewers, there isn't as much actual fighting as one might hope. This is a short story where Alexei Navalny, a Russian opposition figure, ends up in the body of Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, there is no cool book cover. The concept certainly deserves one. Tragically, The Seed of the Leader is not a real book. Most of the Russian isekai is not about making out with Stalin. Again, tragically. After peaking in 2021, the genre declined. The Zorich book, Marine Conqueror of Mages, is about a Russian marine on an anti-piracy mission off the coast of Somalia, who accidentally time travels to medieval Yemen. It received poor reviews. Their heart wasn't in it. It was somewhere else. Sometime in the early 2010s, the 1C company conducted market research that led them to believe that audiences would be interested in a Fallout-style RPG set in the Soviet Union. So they reached out to Bestway in Severodonetsk. The studio had an experienced team and an engine, and though the technology was not an ideal fit for a third-person RPG, it could be adapted. The Zoriches were back working with Morozov. Hooray! The alternate history, fiercely post-apocalyptic game New Union is genuinely capturing people's interest. New Union carries the DNA of every idea we've seen so far. Bizarre geopolitics, stalker-style wasteland, time travel, third-person action, all built on the Man of War technology. This is your final exam. Dmitry and Yana, will you complete the system? The Cuban Missile Crisis escalated into nuclear war, wiping out much of both the capitalist and communist worlds. Yet, despite everything, the USSR survived. The Soviet people constructed an underground city of Pobedograd within the vast network of shelters and bunkers beneath what used to be Moscow. The American Fallout games are skeptical of the old world government, but in the new union, the USSR is a good, if flawed, character. As of 2013, the official Soviet stance is that the capitalist countries no longer exist, but this is not entirely true. Small states have survived, even on former US territory, such as the Texan Directory. Yes, the directories are back. New Union has many desirable RPG features, multiple ways of completing quests, different weapon types and perks, companions with stories and problems, factions, choices and consequences. And there is also a VATS equivalent. Even the physics engine in this appear to behave similar to Fallout 3. God, Howard, thank you. So this sounds like quite a game, and it looks great for an early 2010s product, so how come you never heard of it? Take a guess. The 1C company killed the project in 2013. The decision was driven by the company's shift in focus towards publishing, leading to the closure of its game development division. Leadership change might also had something to do with it. At the time the company withdrew funding, New Union was about 60% complete. The script was fully written, several locations were finished, and a large number of models and animations were ready. The Gem 3 engine modernization was nearly done. Bestway tried continuing the development on their own, but it never went anywhere. Dmitry and Yana stopped updating their live journal page in 2015, only posting occasional book announcements. They kept writing the Tomorrowverse novels. These clearly made money. In the late 2010s, something once again changed at 1C. The suits decided there was potential in game development after all. AIM was once again in the reach zone. Their big move was reviving the King's Bounty series. The franchise had already seen a successful Russian revival with King's Bounty: The Legend in 2008, so why not try again? Media reports suggested that the Zorich duo would play a major role in writing the game, but in reality their contributions were limited. They reportedly helped with dialogue and had a minor influence on the narrative structure, whatever that even means. In this interview, the 1C PR person seemed to be unaware of the franchise's historical significance in Eastern Europe. That's not a good sign. The game was released in 2021. Critics described it as sterile, predictable, phoned in. You do not control this power, imposter. The city of Severodonetsk was destroyed in June 2022. According to the government, only 10% of its pre-war population remains. The Zorich's home city of Kharkiv was under constant attack since the first days of the invasion. Yet, despite everything, Bestway kept working with 1C. Man of War 2 was finally released in 2024 to mixed or average reviews. Meanwhile, the German company Digital Mindsoft kept developing its own branch of the series, which seems to be better received. As for Yana and Dmitry, they completed their maritime internship in 2010s and obtained yacht captain certificates. They now sail the Mediterranean and Atlantic. Their website hasn't been updated since 2019, and both their Facebook pages went silent 2 months into the full-scale invasion. They keep a low profile. Yana's family members appear to have switched to speaking Ukrainian and were raising money for the Ukrainian armed forces. Did the Zoriches change their minds? Seems likely. Having your city bombed will do that. You know what? Maybe there is one final Zorich book in there somewhere, the one to outlive its time. Now, suppose you traveled back to the 1990s with knowledge from the present, the war and all. What would you do? First of all, we invent Russian isekai 15 years ahead of schedule and make our initial capital by selling Stalin-themed erotica to Moscow's literary market. Then, we acquire 1C, the secondary villain of this story. We put the monkey from the Kharkiv Zoo in charge of the company. Next, we strike a deal with BioWare to turn Beltion into a Neverwinter Nights module. Solves basically all its problems. And sure, we fix the bear enclosure. But then what? With our isekai-funded fortune, we could bankroll political assassinations. But for a long time, this has been a point of contention among the theorists from the Ruthenian Culture Research Unit. Is the guy promoting the English Illuminati conspiracies really that much of a threat? Do such ideas really strengthen the Russian cause? Frankly, much of this stuff already feels like a time traveler put it here as a joke. Messing with the time stream is dangerous. We can inadvertently create an even worse future. Perhaps without the older generations holding them back, the real patriots could take over, and then the war would happen anyway, except this time they actually know what they're doing. This was a book episode, a chapter from our Slavjank book, as it's being written. These episodes are irregular, as this is niche content. The next book episode, which won't be out for a few months, will be about the Chosen One, the prince that was promised, and his arch-nemesis. For he who controls the Hyperstorm rules the world.